Mom didn't cry, she didn't slam the phone, she didn't even ask why. She just said, "A backyard? Really, Simone? That's not a wedding, that's a budget picnic for people who've given up." And she hung up. That was the moment I knew she wasn't coming. Not because of a conflict, not because of illness, not even because of a grudge. She wasn't coming because, in her eyes, a wedding in a backyard wasn't worth the drive from Santa Monica to Carmel. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't lavish, and it didn't give her an audience. I stayed on the steps of our back deck long after the call ended, the redwood slats cool against the backs of my legs. Early spring mist rolled in from the Pacific, and I tucked my hoodie tighter around me, staring out past the garden beds we'd been tending for years. I kept holding the phone, half wishing it would ring again, that she'd call and say she was joking, but the silence settled in, heavy and real. Eli came out with 2 chipped ceramic mugs, Earl Grey and honey. He didn't ask. He didn't need to. He sat beside me and handed me the mug, the steam curled upward like a veil between us. "She's not coming," I whispered. He nodded. "Because it's not the Ritz?" I let out a small laugh, dry and sharp. "No champagne tower, no harpist, no lobster risotto. It's not what she imagined when she thought of your wedding," Eli said after a pause. And that hit me hard. It wasn't about me, it never had been. She didn't ask about the garlands of fairy lights we strung from the trees, or the way we spent weekends building wooden benches from reclaimed barnwood, or the hours we spent sowing poppies and lavender, turning our backyard into something magical. She only asked once with a smirk. "You're not doing buffet style, are you?" And she didn't wait for an answer. It's strange how some people shrink a wedding down to its surface. My mother didn't ask about my happiness. She asked about optics, about what the neighbors would think, about what would show up on Instagram. She didn't want to be part of the love, just part of the show. She wanted to be seen. I sent the invitation anyway, printed, not digital, on thick linen cardstock, lavender scented, hand tied with a silk thread I'd dyed myself. No RSVP ever came. The only response was a text. "Looks like something a homeschooled kid would make." I actually laughed. She'd forgotten I was homeschooled for 3 years, because she asked for it. What do you do when the person who raised you tells you, without yelling, without slamming doors, that your life doesn't count, that your most sacred day isn't worth a tank of gas or a change of outfit? You mourn it, quietly, and then you get up. You hang the lights anyway. You press the dress you chose, you rewrite the vows, and you film everything, not for content, but for truth. My place in her world had always been conditional. I was the second daughter, the quieter one, the hand-me-down kid who never asked why half the family scrapbooks skipped my milestones. At my sister Cassidy's wedding, the one Mom still brings up over brunch, I wasn't in the bridal party. I wasn't even in the family row. I was behind the floral arch with a clipboard and headset, cueing the harpist, checking the mini quiches, keeping the peace. I wore $14.00 clearance flats, had blisters by 2 p.m. Cassidy's gown was hand-embroidered silk from Milan, cost more than my undergrad tuition. I watched Mom adjust the train with tears in her eyes, like she was blessing a queen. When I stepped in for a quick photo, she leaned close and whispered, "Your turn will come." It didn't. What came were errands. All this, check that, be useful, stay invisible. The only photo I appear in from that weekend is a blurry background shot, mid-wipe of the dessert table. Someone once tagged me as staff. I didn't correct them. So when I told Mom this wedding would be small, just vows under string lights, a homemade loaf passed between hands, she blinked. "Small," she repeated, like I'd said unacceptable. Then came the final judgment. "That disappointing, Simone. Don't you want something people will remember?" I smiled calmly. "I do," I said. "That's exactly why we're doing it this way." I wanted the people I loved, the man I'd chosen, music beneath the open sky. Plates passed from hand to hand, not cold chicken with mystery sauce dropped off by servers in black vests. I didn't need chandeliers. I didn't need a towering cake with gold fondant and a 5-figure price tag. But the look on Mom's face the last time we spoke said everything. I had failed. Not the wedding plans. Me. I was too small, too quiet, too unpolished for the day she had once imagined. A week later, Cassidy called. For a moment, I hoped it was to extend an olive branch, maybe an apology. Instead, she said, "Mom's really worried. She thinks you're spiraling. She says you're sabotaging the wedding because you're scared to be the center of attention." I let her say it. I thanked her for the call, then I hung up. They didn't understand. They never had. This wasn't sabotage. This was reclamation. This wedding wasn't Mom's press release. It wasn't a status update for extended relatives I hadn't spoken to since I was 12. It was mine. And I wasn't going to plan it like I needed a committee's approval. The morning of the wedding, the sky was soft gray, coastal and quiet, the kind that makes everything bloom brighter. I stood barefoot on the redwood porch, looking out over the backyard we'd built piece by piece. Rows of mismatched chairs borrowed from neighbors curved around the poppy beds, each one tied with hand-dyed ribbon, fluttering in the breeze. Paper lanterns swayed between the trees, weightless and still. Inside, Claire, my best friend since undergrad, was steaming my dress. A soft cream linen gown with pockets. She sewed it herself, stitch by stitch. A gift of patience and love. Eli's cousin had just finished laying out the place cards. No cursive, no gold trim, just printed seed paper, so guests could take them home and grow something. I walked the yard slowly, fingers grazing each jar of fresh herbs and wildflowers. Nothing was filler. Every detail was chosen, placed, loved. No bridal suite, no makeup crew, just me, a quiet mirror, and my hands. I twisted my hair into a knot and tucked 2 gardenias behind my ear. When I stepped into the dress, it didn't feel like a costume. It felt like scaffolding holding all of me in place. Claire caught my eye in the mirror. "You okay?" I nodded. "I think so." She stepped in behind me and adjusted the strap gently. If you believe love doesn't need a ballroom to be beautiful, tap subscribe and join me for the next chapter, when the music begins. And someone unexpected takes a seat in the back row. You look like yourself. I've never felt more like myself. At 4:12 p.m. the ceremony began. No music, no announcements. Just the wind weaving through eucalyptus branches, the rustle of linen, the soft creak of the garden gate as guests stepped inside, like they were entering a moment that already belonged to memory. Eli stood at the end of the garden path, not an aisle, wearing a navy jacket and a smile so uneven, it made me laugh through my tears. His hands shook when he saw me. Mine did too. We didn't have an officiant, no formal script, no declarations to the crowd. We just spoke, to each other, not the kind of vows you practice in the mirror, but the kind that pour out because there's nothing left to hide. I don't remember the words. I remember how they felt. Like stillness. Like truth. Like someone really hearing you. When we kissed, the clapping came, loud, joyful, real. Not polite applause, but the kind that fills your chest. My favorite sound of the day. Dinner came in enamel pots passed hand to hand, no servers, no schedules, just laughter, roasted garlic and rosemary smoke curling up from the grill. Someone hummed along to Van Morrison on an old borrowed speaker. As night fell, the lights blinked on, all those hours stringing LEDs through tree branches now glowing like we'd caught stars and asked them to stay. Claire leaned over and whispered, "This looks like a movie set." But it didn't. It looked like home. And I knew, while I danced barefoot under those lights with Eli, that the ones who didn't show up would never understand this. Not the warmth, not the softness, not the meaning, not the magic. They'd see photos maybe, but they wouldn't see how Eli looked at me during our first dance. They wouldn't hear the toast Claire gave that made me cry. They wouldn't taste the fig cake or the lavender lemonade. They'd missed it. Our friend Devin, an indie filmmaker, not a wedding vendor, filmed it as her gift, just a short piece, 90 seconds. No narration, just light, breath, and music. It opened with Eli wiping his hands on his pants, then me, tying ribbon on a mason jar of wildflowers. It ended with us dancing on the flagstones, paper lanterns swaying above like stars pretending to be close. I cried watching it. So did Eli. "She made it feel like something ancient," he whispered. I nodded. "Do you think it's petty if I post it?" Eli smiled, gentle, not mocking. "Sometimes petty's just the truth finally told." So I posted it, quietly. No hashtags, no commentary, just October 8th. Home. Love. Then I set my phone on the kitchen counter and went to bed. By morning, the views had passed 20,000. By lunch, it crossed 50. That evening, I got a message from a writer at an independent design blog. "Is this your wedding? Can we feature it in our next issue?" I blinked, then read it again. I hadn't expected any of it. By the end of the week, we'd been featured in 2 online magazines and an aesthetic roundup titled, "The Most Beautiful Backyard Wedding You'll Ever See." It wasn't vindication, not really. It was visibility. A gentle kind of being seen, not by people who needed me to perform a curated version of myself, but by strangers who saw the details, really saw them, and felt something. And then the call started. Cassidy was first. She left a voicemail that began with, "Wow," and ended with, "So, why didn't you tell us it was going to be like that?" Then a text from Aunt Janice. "That wedding video is everywhere. I didn't realize it was yours. Stunning." And finally, my mother. No call, just the text. "Is this the wedding I wasn't invited to?" I stared at the screen. Technically, she was invited. She just never responded. The next day, she followed up. "You made us look terrible, Simone. People keep asking why we weren't there. You could have warned us." Warned them? I read it twice, then a third time. I wasn't sure what bothered her more, the fact that the wedding happened without her, or the fact that it was beautiful. This wasn't about hurt feelings. This was about optics. It always had been. I didn't reply. Not immediately. What do you say to someone more upset about not being in the photos than missing the vows? But 3 days later, after Eli watched the short film again, swirling wine in his glass and letting silence stretch long after it ended, he looked at me and said, "You should let her see it, not because she earned it, but because she clearly doesn't understand what she missed." So I sent the message. "If you want to understand what really happened, come to the studio on Friday, 3 o'clock. You can watch the full footage. Nothing's edited." She replied 2 hours later. "Fine." She arrived 10 minutes late, wearing pearls, of course. She walked into Devin's studio like she was touring a non-profit, cold, polite, with an air of obligation. Her heels clicked against the hard wood like a metronome of disapproval. She didn't smile. I didn't offer small talk. I didn't hug her. Devin had arranged the space simply. 2 chairs, a modest screen, and no distractions. The lights dimmed. I pressed play. For the first few minutes she sat stiffly, arms crossed. I watched her from the side, waiting for the eye roll, the dismissive breath, the smirk. But none of it came. There was no narration, no filter, just the natural sounds of that day. Shoes crunching gravel, laughter from behind the ivy, Eli's nervous stammer as he tried to say home. My voice cracked reading my vows. His hand trembled when he took mine. At minute 12, she adjusted her posture. At minute 18, she blinked. At minute 20, as we danced under lanterns that swayed like warm planets above us, she exhaled, like she'd forgotten to breathe. When it ended, I paused on the final still. The yard. Empty chairs, wax pooling in candle jars. The echo of a moment already past. She sat there quietly, then finally said, "It looked expensive." I waited. "You didn't tell me it would be like that." I turned to her. Would it have mattered? Her lips parted, then shut. "I invited you," I said, calm but clear. "You didn't come." "You didn't make it clear," she started. I cut in. "I wasn't auditioning for your approval, Mom. I was getting married." She looked away. And I let the silence sit there, not to punish her, just to let her feel it. When she finally met my eyes again, her voice was sharper, a shade defensive. "You made us look like we didn't care." I tilted my head slightly. "Did you?" She flinched, just for a second, a tiny ripple at the edge of her control. But she didn't answer. I stood, walked to the door, opened it. "Thanks for coming." She lingered, just inside the frame, not ready to step out, not ready to let go. She half stood, then sat back down, just for a second. "I didn't know it would be beautiful," she said softly. "That's the point," I replied. "You didn't care to find out." She didn't hug me when she left. I didn't expect her to. but when the door clicked shut behind her, something shifted. Not closure, not forgiveness, just clarity. I didn't hear from her after that. No follow-up message, no long-winded apology draped in excuses. Just silence. Strangely, it felt more honest than anything we'd said in years. I didn't go to Thanksgiving, no invitation came for Christmas, no one formally cut ties, but no one reached out either. It was a quiet exile, the kind that begins as distance and calcifies into absence. And I was okay. Not in the fairy tale ending kind of way, but in the steady, breathable way. The way you finally understand you don't need to chase doors that were never meant to open. So I poured myself into work. Into Eli. Into the life we were building. The full wedding film was picked up by an arts collective in Seattle. They screened it in a gallery exhibit called Intimate Architecture. We flew up for the opening. People cried watching it. A couple asked if we were actors. I told them, no, just a woman who got married where her life actually began. 6 months passed. One afternoon, I found a small package on our porch. No return address, just my name. Written in careful cursive, I recognized immediately. Inside was a photo. Cassidy's wedding. One I'd never seen. I was in the background, holding a tray of champagne flutes, my face turned, eyes fixed on something just out of frame. On the back were 2 lines. I looked right past you that day. I see you now. No name, no signature. But I didn't need one. I didn't frame it, didn't call to say thanks. I just slipped it into the back of our wedding album. Behind a picture of Eli, spinning me beneath the lanterns, both of us barefoot, both of us laughing. That's the story I'll tell when people ask about our wedding. We planted wildflowers where people expected roses. We fed our guests with our hands, not a checklist. And we invited everyone who mattered, even the ones who never came. Because in the end, a wedding isn't made by who attends. It's made by who stays. And when I look at the photos now, I don't see what's missing. I see what remained. If this story touched something in you, subscribe. Not for me, but for all of us learning to honor what stays, not what leaves. And leave a comment. I'd love to know, what would your version of a true wedding look like?